The wagon creaked in the wind, a lonesome sound against the endless prairie. Eliza watched the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. The metal cuffs bit into her wrists, chaining her to the wooden wheel. 3 days now. Her throat burned with thirst, her stomach a hollow pit. She shifted, trying to find comfort on the hard-packed earth. The movement sent fresh pain through her raw skin. A tumbleweed rolled by, caught in the same wind that whipped her hair across her face. "I'd rather be chained to this wagon than chained to a man who doesn't see me," she whispered to the coming night. The town of Redemption sat a quarter-mile away, its few buildings hunched against the vast emptiness of the territory. Lanterns were being lit in windows. Someone would bring water soon. They weren't trying to kill her, just break her. Eliza closed her eyes against the sting of dust and tears. The chains rattled as she pulled her knees to her chest, waiting for darkness to swallow the land. Redemption wasn't much of a town. One dusty main street lined with weathered buildings, general store, blacksmith, church, and the rusty nail saloon where men gathered each evening. Women moved between homes with baskets and children in tow, their long skirts sweeping the dirt, eyes downcast when passing strangers. Eliza had never learned that particular skill. At 22, she looked people straight in the eye, men included. It made folks uncomfortable, especially Reverend Thatcher, who claimed a woman's gaze should be humble and obedient to the Lord's design. The miller's farm sat on the outskirts of town, good land with a creek running through it. Eliza's father had worked it for 30 years before the consumption took him last winter. Her mother had passed years earlier, leaving just Eliza and her father to work the fields and tend the animals. "A woman needs a husband," Mrs. Whitaker had told her at the general store last week, not for the first time. "Especially with your father gone. It ain't proper, you living out there alone." Eliza had smiled tightly. "I manage just fine, ma'am. Pride comes before the fall, child." The fall came sooner than expected. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, brought by the monthly mail coach. Eliza recognized her brother Thomas's uneven scrawl immediately. He'd left 6 years ago after a bitter fight with their father, heading west with nothing but a horse and his dreams. She sat at the kitchen table that evening, the oil lamp casting yellow light as she read his words. Thomas had land now in Oregon Territory. "Good land," he wrote. "Fertile soil near the mountains with plenty of rainfall. He built a cabin and was raising horses. There's freedom here, Liza," he wrote. "Room to breathe. No one telling you what you ought to be. Come join me. You don't belong there any more than I did." Her heart raced as she read the letter a second time. Then a third. Freedom. The word echoed in her mind like a bell. A sharp knock at the door startled her. She folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket before opening the door. Sheriff Daniels stood on her porch, hat in hand. Behind him waited a group of men, the butcher's son, the blacksmith's apprentice, the banker's nephew, and 2 ranch hands from the Wallace spread. "Evening, Miss Miller," the sheriff said, not quite meeting her eyes. "These gentlemen have come calling. All at once? How efficient." Her attempt at humor fell flat against their stern faces. The butcher's son, Samuel, stepped forward. "We've been patient, Eliza. More than patient." "Patient about what exactly?" "You know what." His face flushed red beneath his beard. "Every eligible man in this county has asked for your hand, and you've turned us all away. Your father's been gone 4 months. It ain't proper. My father's passing doesn't obligate me to marry. A woman can't run a farm alone," one of the ranch hands said. "I've been running it just fine." The men exchanged glances. The sheriff looked at his boots. "We've talked it over," Samuel continued. "You need time to consider your position. Your stubbornness is an affront to God's natural order." Before she could react, they surged forward. Strong hands gripped her arms. She kicked and screamed, but they were too many. They dragged her from the house, across the yard to the old supply wagon. "What are you doing? Let me go." She fought as they pushed her to the ground beside the wagon wheel. The sheriff produced iron shackles, his face grim. "This is for your own good, Miss Miller. A few days to reconsider your attitude. When you're ready to accept one of these fine men as husband, you'll be released." The metal closed around her wrist with a final click. They left her there, chained to the wagon wheel, Thomas's letter still in her pocket. Days passed slowly. They brought water and bread, enough to keep her alive but little more. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day. At night, the temperature dropped, leaving her shivering in her thin dress. Townsfolk passed by, some averting their eyes, others staring openly. Children were kept away. This was a lesson, after all. On the 3rd day, a stranger rode past. Tall and lean in the saddle, he slowed his horse when he saw her. His eyes, sharp blue beneath the brim of his hat, met hers without judgment or pity, just quiet assessment. Then he continued toward town without a word. That evening, the stranger appeared again, this time on foot. He approached slowly, carrying a canteen and a bundle wrapped in cloth. He crouched a few feet away, respecting an invisible boundary. Thought you might want something besides stale bread. His voice was low, roughened by tobacco and trail dust. He unwrapped the bundle, jerky, an apple, and a chunk of cheese. He placed it within her reach, along with the canteen. Why? Eliza asked, suspicious despite her hunger. Seems to me a person ought to have a choice about who they marry. He shrugged. Or if they marry at all. You're not from around here. Jack Rollins. Bought the old Henderson place last month. He nodded toward the hills to the west. Raising horses. Eliza took a careful sip from the canteen. The water was cool and clean. They'll run you out too if you keep helping me. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. Let them try. He came back the next evening and the next. Never staying long, just bringing food and water, sometimes sitting silently nearby as she ate. He didn't ask why she was chained or offer unwanted sympathy. His presence was like a cool shadow in the heat of her humiliation. On the fifth night, Samuel and the others returned. They stood in a half-circle, watching her with a mixture of frustration and determination. This has gone on long enough, Samuel said. Choose one of us, Eliza. Be sensible. She looked at each man in turn, these would-be husbands who thought breaking her spirit was the path to her heart. I choose none of you, she said quietly. I never will. Samuel's face darkened. Then you'll stay chained until winter if that's what it takes. After they left, Eliza leaned her head against the wagon wheel and closed her eyes. The letter in her pocket seemed to burn against her skin, a promise of something beyond this place. That night, clouds gathered on the horizon. By midnight, lightning split the sky and thunder shook the ground. Rain came in sheets, turning the dirt to mud around her. Eliza huddled against the wagon, soaked and shivering as the storm raged. Through the curtain of rain, a figure approached. Jack Rollins, drenched and determined, knelt beside her with something in his hands, bolt cutters from the blacksmith shop. Hold still, he shouted over the storm. The chains fell away with a snap. He helped her to her feet, supporting her as her legs threatened to buckle after days of sitting. Come on, he urged, leading her toward his horse waiting nearby. They rode double through the storm, away from town, toward the ranch he'd purchased. By the time they reached the small cabin, the rain had eased to a steady drizzle. Inside, he lit a lamp and built a fire in the stone hearth. Eliza stood dripping on the plank floor, rubbing her chafed wrists, suddenly aware of her filthy dress and tangled hair. Jack disappeared into another room, returning with a shirt and pants. They'll be too big, but they're dry. He pointed to a screen in the corner. You can change there. I'll make coffee. Behind the screen, Eliza peeled off her sodden dress. The man's clothing hung loose on her frame, but the fabric was soft and blessedly dry. She rolled up the sleeves and pant legs, then emerged to find Jack pouring coffee into tin cups. Why did you help me? She asked, accepting the steaming cup. He stared into the fire for a long moment. My wife died 3 years ago, back in Colorado. Eliza waited, sensing there was more to the story. Sarah was like you. Independent. Spoke her mind. His voice grew quieter. Her father arranged a marriage when she was 17, to a man 40 years her senior, a man with money and influence. He took a sip of coffee, his eyes never leaving the flames. She ran away. Found work in a boarding house where I was staying. We fell in love, got married. His knuckles whitened around the cup. Her father and her intended found us 6 months later. They came with men, with guns. Said she belonged to them. What happened? I fought. Got shot for my trouble. He touched his side briefly. When I woke up 2 days later, they'd taken her back. Forced the marriage while I was unconscious. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. By the time I found them again, she was dead. Fell from a balcony, they said. An accident. His voice held no emotion, just the flatness of an old, deep pain. Some said she jumped. Others whispered her husband pushed her. No one did anything about it. Eliza's throat tightened. I'm sorry. When I saw you chained to that wagon. He finally looked at her. I couldn't ride past again. They sat in silence as the storm continued outside, two strangers bound by understanding of what it meant to be trapped. Morning came with clear skies and difficult decisions. Eliza stood on the porch of Jack's cabin, watching the sun rise over the distant mountains. Her wrists were bandaged now, the raw skin hidden beneath clean cloth. Jack joined her, offering a cup of coffee. They'll come looking, he said. I know. You have options. He leaned against the porch rail. I can take you to the next town over. You could catch the stage heading west. Eliza pulled Thomas's letter from her pocket, smoothing the wrinkled paper. My brother's in Oregon. He wants me to join him. Jack nodded. That's a long journey for a woman alone. I've been alone a long time. A hawk circled overhead, riding the morning thermals. Jack watched it for a moment before speaking again. Or you could stay here. Not with me, he added quickly. I have a line shack about a mile north. It's small but solid. You could have your independence. I'd keep my distance. Eliza studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the scar that cut through his eyebrow, the careful way he held himself apart. Why would you do that? Because everyone deserves a choice. He shrugged. And because I could use help with the horses. You'd earn your keep, not be beholden to anyone. The offer hung between them, unexpected and complicated. What about the men in town? They won't just let this go. Let me worry about that. A wagon appeared on the distant road, dust rising behind it. Several riders flanked it. Looks like we don't have much time to decide, Jack said, straightening. Eliza clutched the letter tighter. I need to get my things from the farm. There's money hidden there. My mother's locket. Jack nodded. We'll go tonight. For now, we need to deal with them. They watched as the wagon drew closer. Sheriff Daniels led the group, with Samuel and the others close behind. They stopped in the yard, faces grim with purpose. Jack stepped off the porch to meet them, his hand resting casually near the pistol on his hip. Eliza remained on the porch, chin raised, the borrowed clothes marking her defiance. Morning, gentlemen, Jack called. Something I can help you with? Sheriff Daniels dismounted, his expression uncomfortable. You've interfered in town business, Rollins. The woman needs to come with us. The woman has a name, Jack replied evenly. And Miss Miller isn't going anywhere she doesn't want to go. Samuel pushed forward. She's made a mockery of every decent man in this town. She needs to learn her place. Seems to me her place is wherever she decides it is. The tension stretched tight as a bowstring. Eliza stepped forward. I'm leaving Redemption, she announced. You can chain me again, but I'll just leave when you're not looking. Or you can accept that I won't be forced into marriage. This isn't proper, the sheriff insisted. A woman needs protection. From what? Eliza asked. From making her own choices? From working her own land? Or from men who think they own her? Samuel's face flushed dark. You ungrateful. Careful, Jack interrupted, his voice soft but edged with steel. Choose your next words with care. The standoff continued, neither side willing to back down. Finally, the sheriff sighed. The town council will seize the Miller farm for unpaid taxes if you leave, he said. You'll have nothing to come back to. Eliza felt a pang at the thought of losing her family's land, but she kept her expression neutral. The taxes are paid through December. I have the receipt. Accidents happen to abandoned property, Samuel threatened. Fires. Vandalism. Jack took a step forward. And witnesses have a way of remembering who made such threats. The sheriff raised his hands, clearly wanting to avoid bloodshed. Let's all calm down. Miss Miller, be reasonable. These men are offering you security, a future. They're offering me a cage, she replied. I'd rather take my chances with freedom. The impasse stretched until the sheriff finally nodded. Have it your way. But don't expect help when this folly leads to ruin. He turned to his horse. Come on, boys. She's made her choice. Samuel wasn't ready to concede. This isn't over, he warned, pointing at Eliza, then at Jack. Neither of you will be welcome in Redemption after this. Somehow we'll manage without your hospitality, Jack replied dryly. They watched as the men rode away, dust settling in their wake. Only when they disappeared from view did Eliza release the breath she'd been holding. They'll be watching the farm, she said. Jack nodded. We'll wait until dark. That night, under a moonless sky, they approached the Miller farm from the creek side, tying their horses in a stand of cottonwoods. The house stood dark and silent. Jack carried a rifle, scanning constantly for movement as they crept toward the back door. Inside, Eliza moved with practiced ease through the familiar rooms. She gathered only what mattered, her mother's locket and Bible, a photograph of her family, warm clothes, and the money hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the pantry. Everything fit in a single canvas bag. In her bedroom, she paused at the small mirror, barely able to make out her reflection in the darkness. She looked different somehow. The same face, but changed by the past week's events. Harder. More certain. We should go, Jack whispered from the doorway. Someone's coming. They slipped out the back just as lantern light appeared on the road. Crouching in the shadows of the barn, they watched as Samuel and two others approached the house, rifles in hand. I told you they'd be watching, Eliza breathed. They made it back to the horses without being seen, riding hard through the night to put distance between themselves and the farm. By dawn, they were miles away, resting the horses by a small stream. Eliza splashed cold water on her face, trying to wash away exhaustion. What now? Jack studied the eastern horizon. That depends on you. Oregon's still an option. She thought of Thomas, waiting in a place she'd never seen. A new start, far from redemption and its suffocating expectations. Then she looked at Jack, this stranger who'd risked everything to help her, who understood what it meant to be trapped. What about your offer? The line shack still stands. He met her gaze steadily. But I want to be clear, it's not a proposal. You'd be your own woman. A neighbor, maybe someday a friend. Nothing more unless you decided otherwise. The sun broke over the horizon, painting the landscape in gold. Eliza felt the weight of the decision, the paths stretching before her like the fork in the stream where they rested. I'd like to see this lined shack, she said finally. Before I decide. Jack nodded, a hint of something like relief crossing his features. It's rough. Nothing fancy. I don't need fancy. I need honest. They rode north through rolling grassland dotted with wildflowers. By midday, they crested a hill and Jack pointed to a small structure nestled against a stand of pines. There it is. Not much to look at. The cabin was indeed small. One room with a stone chimney, a covered porch facing east. A creek bubbled nearby, and the grass grew thick and green. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped even in summer. Inside was simple, a bed frame with a straw mattress, a table with 2 chairs, a cast-iron stove, and shelves built into the walls. The floor was swept clean, the single window letting in streams of sunlight. The roof doesn't leak, Jack said, watching her take it all in. Stove draws well. Creek has good water year-round. Eliza set her bag on the table, running her fingers over the rough-hewn wood. How far to your place? 1.5 miles that way. He nodded west. Far enough for privacy, close enough if there's trouble. She walked to the window, looking out at the land stretching away. No fences, no neighbors watching, no expectations except those she set for herself. I could plant a garden there, she said, pointing to a patch of ground near the creek. Maybe keep some chickens. Jack leaned against the doorframe, giving her space to imagine. Land's good for it. I could help you build a coop. Eliza turned to face him, decision made. I'd like to stay. For a while at least. See if I can make something here. He nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. I'll bring supplies tomorrow. Things you'll need to get started. As he turned to leave, she called after him. Jack? Thank you. Not just for this, but for seeing me. Really seeing me. He paused, looking back with those clear blue eyes that had first met hers beside the wagon. Everyone deserves that much, at least. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and adjustment. True to his word, Jack kept his distance, coming by only to deliver supplies or offer help with heavy tasks. They established a routine. She helped with the horses 3 days a week. He taught her to hunt and trap. They shared meals occasionally, their conversations growing easier with time. Samuel and the others from town appeared once, watching the ranch from a distance. Jack rode out to meet them, the conversation brief and tense. They didn't return. Eliza wrote to Thomas, explaining her decision to stay. The letter would take months to reach Oregon, and his reply even longer, but it felt right to let him know she was safe, that she'd found her own kind of freedom. Summer faded into autumn. Eliza's garden yielded vegetables, and the 6 chickens Jack had brought provided eggs daily. The line shack became home, its simplicity a comfort rather than a hardship. She added curtains at the window, dried flowers hanging from the rafters, a rag rug beside the bed. On the first truly cold evening of fall, Jack arrived with firewood and a haunch of venison. They cooked together, the familiar silence between them comfortable now. As they ate, Eliza studied him across the table, the way firelight softened the angles of his face, how his hands, rough from work, still moved with surprising gentleness. Do you ever regret it? She asked suddenly. Helping me that night? He considered the question, taking his time as he always did before speaking. Not once. Even though it cost you standing in town? I never wanted their approval anyway. He set down his fork. Do you regret staying? Eliza shook her head. No. Though sometimes I wonder what Oregon is like. You could still go. Nothing keeping you here. She looked around the cabin, at the home she'd made, the life she'd built. There's plenty keeping me here. Their eyes met across the table, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Not love, not yet, but the foundation for it, respect, trust, shared purpose. Winter's coming, Jack said, breaking the moment. It gets harsh up here. I'm not afraid of harsh. He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes. No, I don't suppose you are. Later, as he prepared to leave, they stood on the porch watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The first snow would come soon, blanketing the land in white silence. I was thinking, Jack said, his breath visible in the cold air. The south pasture would be good for wheat. Come spring, if you wanted to try your hand at farming again. Eliza heard what he wasn't saying, that he saw a future with her here, not just as neighbors, but as partners in this life they were building. I'd like that, she replied. He nodded, satisfied. As he mounted his horse, she called after him. Jack, I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, he agreed, and rode into the gathering darkness. Eliza remained on the porch long after he disappeared from view, watching the night sky unfold above her. The chains that had once bound her to a wagon will seemed a lifetime ago. A different woman, a different world. She touched her wrist where the scars were fading, reminders of what she'd endured and overcome. The prairie stretched before her, vast and open, full of possibility rather than loneliness. Freedom, she realized, wasn't just about breaking chains. It was about choosing your own path, even when that path led somewhere unexpected. She turned and went inside, closing the door against the cold. The cabin welcomed her with warmth and the promise of tomorrow.